Today's the day I'm gonna drag the transmission case out of the junk pile. I'll show you here in a little bit. Once I get the transmission case pulled out and out in the open, I'll discuss some of the features of it to make it the correct year for 1925. And it's actually going to be an early 1925 case. And once I get it out in the open, I'll show you some of those aspects about it, those features. So there's the transmission case, and it's surrounded by, there's a bunch of wheels, there's part of a GP, and here's a 27D that hopefully someday I'll get put together. And then here is a 1931D, and I got to drag the transmission case back through there, and my loader is there, so I'm gonna have to move some of the scrap iron to get it pulled through there. So wish me luck. As you can see, it's pretty secure where it's at. Nobody's gonna run off with it, that's for sure. But today's the day. It's a nice day, and once I get it out, I'll show you some of the aspects of the transmission case. Welcome back, everybody. Today we're working on the transmission case, and I was gonna detail some of the issues with it. I had to extract a couple bolts, and I chased all the bolt holes, and it's just getting sandblasted now. One issue is I have a crack right in this area that I'm going to work on today. And then also another issue is on the follower shaft, that the followers run against the camshaft. There's a shaft in there, and it has a gusset in there that is always worn out, and I don't know if I can get a picture of that, but it's right up in there. And so I have to work on that. Today I'm getting time to work on the front axle and getting the parts that are originally used sandblasted so I can get to getting those painted. And so I'll be set for winter once I get this done, move it all inside into the heat where I can work on it this summer. But I wanted to point out a couple things on this front axle. This is a correct axle for a 25. As you can see, the number on it is a D483R. In 23, they made the fabricated trussed axle. And then in 24, they came out with this axle, but it was a little bit more petite in this area without the gussets in here and without the drilled hole for the cover. And so it's a little lighter. The holes here were a smaller radius rod hole. And then they beefed up the axle and put the gussets in, but still used the same part number through 25. And then in 26, they went to the D776R axle, which resembles this in somewhat, but it's just built a little heavier. And they used that through 26 and 27. And then they went to the really beefy axle. So they must have been having lots of trouble with them, lots of updates. But as you can see, this one's pretty good shape, not broke anywhere. The spindles are straight, and it's a good straight axle. Even the front pin is not worn out that much, so that's going to make a really good axle. Now getting to the main case, I've got it sandblasted off. I've glypoled the rear transmission housing, fixed a crack along the side right down here. This is just superficial on the outside. What I did is I V'd it out on the inside, and to the point where I almost came through with a large angle grinder. And then I filled up that groove on the inside with the epoxy, the industrial epoxy. You can't even tell it in here, but it's right in there. And I had the axle housing in to line everything up so everything was flat. It'll swivel so I can tighten up the chain. And I was hoping it wouldn't crack open once I took that off, but everything stayed put, and I think it's going to be a good job. The stuff I used kind of resembles JB Weld, but it's a DevCon 10110 plastic steel putty, and it's a little thicker than JB Weld when you get it mixed up, and you can work with it for at least an hour, but it's a industrial use epoxy. Another spot I used it on was in the crankcase. These are my covers to cover up everything when I want to go paint the green on. But inside here, right down here where the follower shaft is at, I've got a plug in there right now so I don't put glycol in there, but I filled that up with the epoxy and drilled it out, and it's good and tight now with the shaft. And so I'm hoping that all works good. But anyway, I'm just ready to glycol the crankcase, and then I've made cardboard covers for all the holes, and I'm going to put the covers on the top to cover that up, but so I get it all sealed up and I don't paint over the glycol on the inside. And also, I didn't want to paint the matting surfaces for the gaskets because I don't think it's a very good idea. The paint will deteriorate with the oil and gas and lift off, and then you have a gap where the matting surface is underneath the paint, and then the gasket is on top of the on top of the paint, so you're taking a chance. So I'm trying to keep all the matting surfaces cleaned up, so then when I put on the gaskets, I can seal those on both sides. But I'm going to put the axles in. There's one. And here's the other one. D628Rs, which is correct for a 25. It wasn't originally drilled for a grease zerk, but they had sometime drilled that. But then the next update, when they went to a 700 number axle, why they had a boss here with a grease cup, and that came in 26 then. But these are correct for 25, and then 24 was even a different axle. It was a lighter one with lighter bolts around the outside, and I believe those were like a 54R. Gonna finish up putting on the glycol in the crankcase, put all the covers on, cover everything up. Got plugs in all the holes, and then the bolts of course will show, and I'll paint those along with the case. The cardboards are just covering up what will cover up with the other cast iron pieces that bolt on then. Now that all the work's been done on the inside of the transmission case, it's time to paint the outside. And so I chained it onto the loader and hauled it outside on a nice calm day. so that I wouldn't get paint on the inside of the shop. And I'd been working on finding the drabbest enamel John Deere paint that I had. I didn't want it to contrast the old parts with the paint color, so I tried to find the drabbest without the shine, without the hardener in it, so it would kind of match what I'm going to do next with adding on the painted new old stock parts. And then I hung all the sandblasted parts on the rack, the original used parts that I didn't think I would find new. I hung those on the rack and rolled it outside. The gun I used is just an auto body siphon feed that I run at about 45 pounds of pressure. And there's a lot of nooks and crannies in these parts, so you have to hit them at different angles, several coats. And from there, you just have to kind of work around each part until you get everything covered well without a run. That is the biggest trick. And once I got everything painted well, I moved it back in the shed to dry. I left it there for a few days before I did anything more to it, so it had time to dry and harden. In the meantime, I went on a parts run to Kansas. I've got it all painted up, ready to go into the shed so I can work on it this winter and reassemble it. As you can see, I've got the outside painted the green and the inside has got glycol on it. So that'll cut back on the contamination from the cast iron into the oils that'll be in it. As you can see, I left the matting surfaces so I can put a gasket and some gasket material in there and not have to worry about oil seeping out behind the painted surface that I can't seal up. So what I did is I cut temporary covers out of cardboard. From the castings, I peened up the covers so that they would bolt on and cover up all the holes in the case, so I'd have unfinished matting surfaces for the gaskets to go. And on top of it all, it painted the bolts too. So I've got clean matting surfaces, plus the bolts are all painted. I'm sure it'll scuff them up as I rebuild, but I'll have to come back and paint those again after I get it all together. But there it is. I thought the temporary covers were a good idea. Of course, I put the tin covers on top to cover up the top holes. Also the crack that was in it, right down here, it doesn't even show up. And from the inside, you can't really tell either right down there. And I fixed the holes for the valve followers. That hole right down there, I filled it up with the epoxy and let it dry around the shaft. And then I removed the shaft before it got completely dry. But it fits in there good and snug. So I think that'll be a good fix to that also. Well, we will roll it in the shed, and on my next video, or videos down the road, I will show you the assembly.
Tractor.